So it's been close to 20 years, 18, but directionally right. So many thanks for giving the opportunity to speak. I was asked to share a little bit a state of the nation on European energy supply. I'm very happy to do so. And as consultants, as we do this, obviously with a few facts and figures and numbers. If we look at, and maybe we can bring up the slides, if we look at the state of European energy supply, it's first and foremost obviously one of the energy transition, with all the directional trends that this room knows. First one, an ambition to continue reducing primary energy demand, if that is working. Maybe we can get up the next one. Continue to push towards reducing primary energy demand. Every kilowatt hour that is not being consumed is a good one. Second one, then obviously increasing the shift to renewable energies. Both of those trends with 1/3 as a key figure, right? The ambition to reduce energy demand by 1/3 between 2017 and 2030. And the second 1/3 figure is for the share of renewable energies in total for the European continent towards 2030 as we speak. But this is so much more than an energy transition. It's a geopolitical transition, it's a social transition, it's an economic transition, it's an affordability transition. And affordability more and more comes up in the discussions, has dominated the discussion and the direction over the last 2 weeks. Germany, as an example, in terms of power prices, is paying, as we speak, 2 to 3 times higher power prices for most, not all, but for most of the industrial players, and likewise for residential households, as compared to, for example, the US or China. It doesn't really matter, or it matters less from a household perspective, but certainly for our industrial companies, these are the competitors to look at. And when you look at gas prices, this is even worse. The difference in price levels between European industry players that they need to pay and their global competitors, it's about a factor of 5. So let's zoom into that affordability issue a little bit more. Let's stay in Germany. Let's zoom into electricity. Electricity system costs, a simple proxy for power prices, have increased by about 70% since 2010. That's the difference between the first 2 bars. Half of that triggered by the energy transition, the need to build out grids, renewables, etc. I would personally say very rightfully so. Half of that triggered not only but also by the energy crisis and the increasing fossil fuel prices that, to an extent, inform power prices. So 70% increase, set to further increase, depending on the assumptions you make, further until 2035. The good news is there are meaningful levers to reduce this power price level and to actually go back below historic levels in the future. But we just need to have to do it. Over the past 2 weeks, there have been a number of studies published, one of them from our side, and they all more or less speak the same language. First of all, you need to adjust further build-out plans on the renewable side, on the grid side, on other technology sides, to a realistic demand level. We've been, simply speaking, too optimistic on the uptake of electric vehicles, heat pumps, etc. Let's simply adjust that. That is the first green bar that really has the potential to reduce further increases of system costs and hence power prices. The second one that you see called here, pursue more economic levers. It's simply choosing less costly alternatives. A hotly debated topic and example is obviously for the long-distance transmission lines. Should these be underground? Should we choose the overhead ones? Obviously, the overhead ones, the traditional ones, are much cheaper than the underground ones. We have faced a trade-off with their acceptability. The things that are underground are not seen. The not in my backyard syndrome is much less so of an issue, but obviously it's a much more expensive solution. So that would be the key one in the middle one. The last one called here, avoid major cost risks and price peaks. Whenever we have scarcity in the system, be it for the lack of conventional power generation or for the lack of backup thereof, we see price peaks, and the frequency and intensity of these price peaks has increased and is set to continue to increase significantly. So what we need to do in this bucket is to make sure we avoid these price peaks. Continued push on flexibility on the demand side, likewise on the power generation side in this example here, making sure we have at all times enough backup capacity in the system. We've been talking about this for 10 years. Now we see the economic implications more and more hitting, you see another major contribution. And with that, around about 20% of power prices can be reduced by way of the proxy of system cost, but that's actually a fairly robust one. And 20% does make a big, big difference in terms of international competitiveness, but also in terms of acceptability in the broader population, in terms of the power prices that we all pay. Another aspect of the transition, moving from affordability to economic growth, we've just heard that in the prior part of the session. If you look at globally, what are the major growth sectors for the next 10 to 15 years to pursue, you will find those multi-trillion-dollar per annum opportunities roughly in 4 sectors. Energy and climate, that's mainly a tech game, digitalization, defense, as discussed earlier today, and health, simplifying just a little bit. The green bubbles that you see on that chart relate to climate and energy technologies. It's the things we already know of. It's obviously continued build out of renewables. It's continued build out of grid technologies. It's electric vehicles. It's heat pumps, and so on. There's no revolution as such from what we see in the technologies to be expected, but a major increase and obviously accompanied with a major economic opportunity. And the good news is that many European countries, this is again an example for Germany, are actually quite well positioned to pursue those opportunities and to play a meaningful role on the international agenda, and not just leave the green tech game to our Chinese competitors, to our US competitors and partners. I think Europe has a role to play, but we yet need to get this right. The basis is there in terms of innovation, in terms of skills, in terms of industrial policy yet to be proven, in terms of entrepreneurship, investment, readiness yet to be proven as well. But I think on par, this is good news. Summing it up, I would want to share 4 imperatives for the further part of the session and the discussion. The first one, obviously, further diversify energy imports. Question was asked to me, what is my state on the European energy supply? If we take Russia as an example, what used to be more than 50% of European gas supply went down to 12% over the course of 2 years. In 2023, went back up to 20% in the last year, and creating new dependencies. US, as one example, 20% of our gas supply in Europe is from US, 1/6 of the oil supply, and 1/3 of the coal. My personal view would be, in those massive times of geopolitical shifts and uncertainties, the more we can diversify and avoid betting on one single player of whatever nature, the better we are. So the first one remains a key one. Renewables obviously have the nice feature that at least the production is always more localized. Second one, make the transition affordable. Again, one would be tempted to say we offered a few perspectives of how that can be done. My personal belief is this is the single biggest success factor for the transition to move forward, to re-establish acceptance, both in the industrial part and on the residential household individual population part. Third one, in light of the massive economic opportunities that we've seen, the green bubbles, I believe that jointly driving energy and industrial policy making at the European, but also in an individual national country level is an absolute imperative for us to pursue those promising growth opportunities that we see there. We yet need to put the boundary conditions in place, not only, but also for Germany. And last but not least, obviously, the more we can think and drive energy sourcing, energy policy making from a European perspective and not just from an individual national perspective, the more powerful we will be. We've seen this in the fiscal union many, many years ago. We are debating this, obviously, for all the right reasons in the defense part. Energy always has been one of the last remaining strategic sectors that was and is largely driven at the national level. I think the more we can open up, put this on the European stage, the more successful we will have a chance to be as a continent and as a European Union. And with that, I want to conclude and hand over back to Rainer Esser for the continuation of the panel. Thank you so much.